two co-founders jamming it out around headcount, strategy, and execution, and bringing them together. It's 2025, and AI is top of mind for everyone. So I'm super duper excited to have Jeet Mukerji here on the webinar today, talking about bringing strategy and execution together, empowering HR leadership, and where AI can play a role in that too. Jeet, thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks so much for having me on, Haris. I think this is a super timely topic, especially with our MPL Live event that's happening next week in SF. So yeah, really pleased to be on talking about this.
Absolutely. So quick shout out there. So Kinfolk and CandorIQ are co-hosting with the wonderful team at MPL a happy hour. We're gonna link all the details in the LinkedIn comments. Emma is gonna help with that. So if folks are listening, you're welcome to join. It's gonna be a great time in San Francisco at a place called Wild Seed. But let's jump into the topic. Really quickly, so CandorIQ, we do compensation management, we do workforce planning, kind of rolled into one for people teams, for finance teams, for managers as well. And that's a little bit about us. But Jeet, please tell us about Kinfolk.
Yeah, thanks, Haris. So effectively, we are an AI HR coordinator called Kin that sits in your Slack in Teams, and it helps to coordinate the workflows and also be able to guide managers. And we built it because we saw how little infrastructure there is for all the invisible work that happens between the systems and the people to make this stuff to actually take place, and to help people leading the day to day on a day-to-day basis, especially in high growth environments. So that's why we wanted to build something that was employee facing, but informed by the HR team to guide people like managers through processes.
That's amazing. And Jeet, maybe let's jump into, why did you decide to start this company and like solve this problem? Love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, because I sucked as a manager, Haris. That's why, and I needed the guidance. I went from IC to manager, and it was a whole different ballgame. There were so many different things to consider, and the real unlock was being able to partner with the people team and be able to get that guidance. And that wasn't always available because they were so inundated with manual drudgery and administrative work. So we wanted to build something that would be able to lift that admin away and be able to provide guidance for managers and provide the insight and allow HR teams to extend themselves beyond those manual conversations and make themselves available to managers on a 24/7 basis.
Amazing. That's not indifferent from the story of CandorIQ and why I started as well as an operator, as a manager, having to manage larger and larger teams. I spent so much time in spreadsheets and asking people team various different questions, the finance teams as well, and so I have complete empathy for your backstory there. That makes a lot of sense. So Jeet, before we kind of dive into some of the details, I know we'll get very tactical as we drill in, but let's start at the top. So this topic today, headcount planning, headcount strategy, workforce design, compensation. Why is that important? Why should people care?
Yeah, because things are moving super quickly, and it's so easy to be in reactive mode, right? And you will have seen this from the customers that you guys are working with as well. So without having that strategic view, you're always kind of filling things rather than planning for the future. And it doesn't just end there, right? It's also about, once we have that plan, how do we then get that visibility, and how do we continue to have that visibility? And then how do we execute on that plan? Which is really where the magic starts to happen. And how can you bring some of those insights into the day-to-day work of managers? So when we're talking about why this is important, for me, it's not only about the planning piece, but it's about the visibility, ongoing visibility, and then also how do you execute on that basis as well. But I'm sure you have a richer and deeper answer from your side, Haris.
That's no, I mean, like you said, a lot of key things is like, people strategy, people decisions are business decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you hire the right people, you retain them, you can like address their questions and needs. obviously there's many pieces to that puzzle. It's not just about how much you pay them. It's not just about like, it's also about their managers, the work they do. Is it fulfilling? The company culture? There's many different factors there. But like, to your point, the first step there is empowering managers to have a sense of their workforce, to understand like who their employees are, what the company policies and processes are, what the parameters are in which they can kind of manage and answer questions and guide their team and educate them. So
Yeah.
I do think it starts with providing visibility for sure. And I like what you said around, it's a lot of the tools out there, at least, like, they're discrete point in time. Like, here's an onboarding tool. Now you run payroll. Now you do this. But this is much more of a continuous process, and ongoing. So being able to provide ongoing visibility, I think, is key. Yes,
Yeah.
there's certainly, like, once you have visibility, you kind of have to think about what does, a multiplayer experience look like? How does the manager collaborate with their HRBP, maybe their FP&A analyst, like the right, their leadership, like the right folks to make decisions. But it certainly, I think, starts with providing that insight and visibility. So yeah,
Exactly.
agree there.
And I have a question for you, actually, Haris. Is that when you're working with clients on planning to give them that visibility, like how do you help them make sure that the structure and the comp strategy actually translates into outcomes?
Yeah, that's a good one. So one is, first you have to define it. And some clients do a great job. They'll define, here's our pay strategy and the why, how it's tied to business goals and KPIs. And if they don't do that, we usually tell them to start there, because, like, you have to kind of lay the foundation. Once you've set that, then we try to empower managers to see that too and understand it, right? Like, and it might be, what are bonuses and variable comp, and why is it structured a particular way? What incentive is driving? What behavior is driving? Why is equity structured the way it is? So really kind of helping managers understand that, and really tying back to like business goals and objectives. What are we trying to achieve there? I think that's pretty key as well. And then like on our end, we'll try to give on an ongoing basis. I like what you said on continuous measure. So how are my teammates or my department doing versus the goals I set? Whether it's budget or compensation and performance.
Yeah.
So it's tying those things together. One thing I'll call out, and Jeet, it's probably something that you all solve as well, is the outputs are only as good as the inputs, right? And so I think the first challenge there is, can you bring together all the right data to be able to answer these questions? Just an example, like if you're hiring someone, it's not just about what the benchmarks are. It's about what's your budget for your department, how are existing employees making, what are your top performers getting paid internally, because you want to triangulate across all of those different things. And so being able to bring all that information to bear for the managers is key.
Yeah, totally. I mean, while I was a manager, there were so many different places I had to go to, so many different people I had to speak with to get the set, like to answer one question, which might have A or B points. But it was chaos. And to your point, there was so much time on spreadsheets, static spreadsheets with outdated data. That actually was really difficult. And we were having to go to places where conversations weren't happening. It's like, oh, fill in this ticket and we'll come back to you. Or nudge someone, no, they're out on vacation, to be able to do that kind of thing. So being able to tie all that data together is really important. And in very large enterprises, those systems can exist and they're trying to be solved. But in growing organizations, that infrastructure is just not there. And data is still trapped in silos, whether it's in the HRIS or in spreadsheets or in people's heads or somewhere else. But being able to have something as a central source, and then being able to have something that pulls through, so that when managers, after that initial visibility, like how do you give them that continuous visibility at their fingertips when they're making decisions, that becomes really important, right? Because otherwise, how do you make sure that that person is enabled, and how can they enable their teams if they don't have the information at their fingertips?
And Jeet, a question for you. Assuming an organization is doing a good job, that like the CHRO has like visibility into like all the different things they need to see, right? And they can do a good job setting strategy, working with their leadership team. how do you connect the dots between strategy and execution?
Yeah.
Right, those are two different things. One does not mean the other, and so there's a lot of work to do that there as well. Like, curious to get your take.
Yeah, totally. And I used to be a product manager previously, and I think you were too, right? And as we'll know, is that we have to reduce the friction for our users as much as possible to drive adoption for a particular product or function or feature. So when we're thinking about how do we translate something from a thought and from all that planning to execution, I think one thing that we see repeatedly is like, how do we go to where our users are? And how do we reduce the friction for them to be able to get what they need? Forget about building a product around them or asking them to go somewhere. Like everything that we've seen so far is like, hey, you have to go to this particular place, or you have to ask this particular person. But in order to even start thinking about how do we get from strategy to execution, make it available to those people where they are working, build for them, build with them in mind, as opposed to building something with the HR team in mind, uh, and talk to them, ask them what they need, and why do they need it, and when do they need it, and then build for that. That's kind of what we've seen. How do you guys see it playing out for your customers?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. You know, like a parallel I'll draw is kind of like the customer support space, right?
Yeah,
Um, and it's you want if you're looking to solve problems for your customers, you always wear the hat of like, hey, how can I provide the right answers at the right time in the right format, you know, in the right way to our customers? And and companies are very hyper focused at it, you know, and that's why you see CS teams are at the forefront of AI. Not that AI is a be all end all solution, but there's a lot AI can do. But they're also thinking about that. I think you kind of have to have the same mindset, right? You have to think about who are your personas. Like in this case, it's internal people. It might be HR, it might be the frontline managers, it might be the execs, it might be like the C-suite. They're your customers. So, like, what do they care about? When? In what format? How do you make it really easy? And I think just kind of, yeah, taking that mindset unlocks a lot for organizations. You know,
yeah,
unlocks a lot for the people team. You know, yes, we met. You know, many of them might measure like you know CSAT scores, like or employee happiness or surveys and stuff. You know, do that stuff. Um, but really, I think if you have that mindset and you think from first principles, you can solve a lot of those problems. One of the challenges I find with like surveys is they're lacking. They're probably like, you know, 6 months
yeah.
behind in terms of collecting the feedback, and then another 3 to 6 months to take action. That's already too late. Um,
It's so true, and that's one of the reasons why we built Kinfolk the way it is invariably we hear, hey, I don't have visibility into what our internal customers, i.e., our employees, are asking for, and then we have to wait for a survey that might be a month too late. And when, as an employee, when I'm filling in a survey, I don't remember what happened 3 weeks ago.
yeah,
I'm just filling in whatever's top of mind. I'm trying to get through the survey as quickly as possible. Whereas if we can get real data from what's actually happening within the business and what were the strategic priorities and how they link to that, then I have a much clearer view of where to invest my resources as a people team. And being able to have that visibility directly through the interactions of what managers are doing, what managers are asking for, gives us a much tighter feedback loop. And again, it comes down to kind of the product thinking principles that we can apply if we treat employees like our internal customers. So I mean, I guess on that topic, I'd be curious to hear. I'd actually love to learn more about Candor, and maybe you can talk after this in a bit more detail. But how do you make those systems more manager friendly so that they do get access to the information when they need it, and it's easier for them to execute?
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one, we try to pull together, like we think about jobs to be done. Again, like going kind of, you know, maybe going back to some of our product training. What do managers care about in context of something they want to do? And like, you know, we use the hiring example. A lot of solutions will just give you benchmarking data and let you figure it out. No, but the manager, like, you know, if you're the hiring manager, you want to know what your budget is, what your existing employees are making, what does the market say, what's your maybe like win-loss ratio if you're paying X dollars to candidates. And like you want to be able to pull in all the right information to make decisions. That's certainly one. The other thing we try to do is, what you said, like provide continuous feedback. Sometimes that can be in the form of, here's some relevant analytics or reports or dashboards for you today or this week. Here are alerts, or like measuring risk, like employee churn detection and stuff like that. Like, here's where we think there might be issues when it comes to your headcount plan, like you're behind the hiring goal, or you have a number of employees who are underpaid, so like flagging things that might be a risk, and why.
Mm,
There's much more we can do, like over time with AI, like provide recommendations and guidance and best practice, like the if we can build an
yeah.
easy button, like obviously that's kind of the end state. It's easier said than done, and sometimes there's a lot more nuance. But
Yeah.
if we can also help with forecasting, predictions, and like like recommendations,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunity, and transparently, I don't think we've perfectly skinned the cat there. There's a lot more work we need to do that I'm excited about over the next 12 months. Um, but
There's
really,
always
yeah.
always more work to be done, right? And I guess one question that I've been asked before is like, hey, you're going to get managers who are super engaged, and they're going to be looking at those dashboards, they're going to be engaging with that data, and they're going to be proactive. And then there's going to be the people who are just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even want to be a manager necessarily. So how do you think about enabling those people that are either disengaged and don't care as managers, which has a huge cost on the rest of the business, or they're just too junior and then therefore they don't know what they don't know?
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, a few things come to mind, and I'm just thinking out loud. One is, usually when someone doesn't care, it's because they don't understand the details, right? And so
Mm,
being able to educate them around the details is really key. Um, I, I think Kinfolk can help with a lot of it as well. Is like maybe a manager was like, hey, you should only hire. I'm making up an example that we see, like hire in San Francisco. No, or like the job rec is a remote hire and the pay is different. The manager's like, no, I like this person, I'm going to hire them in New York or London or San Francisco, and
yeah,
they don't think about the trade-offs of what they're doing, because now uh, the engineering team might be sitting somewhere else. Maybe the how much you're paying in some of those markets is different. And so often it's not that the manager doesn't care; it's the manager is not thinking about it or is not aware. And so giving them, I find that if most majority of the time, not always, keep providing all the right information to the managers so that they're educated, informed, most people are going to try to make the right call. Um, and then
yeah,
yes, you ultimately need some checks and balances, and have, like, the HRBP and like the managers be involved. But I think really kind of empowering the frontline managers and training them and educating them on a continuous basis it will solve, I think, a majority of the challenges or limitations.
yeah. And I think one thing that comes to mind when we talk about this is, educating and training. It's like, hey, we're gonna do a course on how to be a good manager, and then we're gonna forget about it, and then we're done. We're good. You're now a good manager. But actually, I think what you're talking about, continuous enablement, I think it's less about here's a course and more about here's the information that you need to make the right decision for your team. And part of that, a lot of that is the data that is sitting via CandorIQ, and it's that kind of strategic information that's going to help them make the right calls. Um, Combining that with something that may be to do with training, but if we can make it more bite size and then deliver it in the flow of work, both proactively of, hey, performance reviews coming up, this is what you got to think about. Um, or you have a new hire starting, this is the type of stuff that you have to think about. We've automatically booked a meeting for you. Your 30, 60, 90 days are coming. Those are all those things that an AI agent can do. And then also being available to be a thought partner with all the knowledge of the business, so that managers can reach out to someone 24/7 if they need to, that is certified as part of your HR team, and that is equipped with the data that's available through
Yeah,
tools like Candor and other tools.
that I hope. Yeah, I definitely like that. That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back as my time as a manager, and sometimes I'm working on performance reviews at nighttime, right? And I don't want to message my HRBP, or I might have some. The other one is like, as a like a first time manager. sometimes I feel, like this, my question is silly, but it might not actually be, right? And sometimes people don't want to ask questions because they want to, project like maturity and seniority as managers, but especially as a first time manager, if I'm thinking back to my career too, but I wish I was a bolder and more, asking some of those questions, and
Yeah,
so just being able to do it in a safe environment, I guess, helps. Um, and sometimes you don't want to, another thing I think about is like, maybe it's a small question. You don't want to ask your HR business partner or like someone in the HR team like series of small questions like every day, every hour, and like that feels that
yeah,
feels like it's going to impact the HR team's productivity as well, because they have other projects to do too. And if they're only answering questions all day, every
yeah,
day, like every 30 minutes, like it's hugely disruptive to their work. And so, um,
totally,
so you,
totally.
yeah,
We've
so
seen we've seen uh so many people drive into Kinfolk's DMs as opposed to in a public channel, because it's seen
oh,
more as a safe space. There's no judgment there, right? There's no human being there, so I can
yeah,
ask all the questions that I want to be able to ask. We've had some silly questions in there as well, but obviously the other more sensitive ones, which we then parse out to protect that manager, and while still giving full visibility on the context of the conversation for the HR team as well. Um, and I guess there's the higher level questions as well, where okay, I've got the basic repetitive stuff, but there's also questions that I want to come to my people partner with, and have a strategic conversation. But even some of that should already be available so that we can actually make the most of our time. I guess that's where something like CandorIQ can really help, because even before they have that conversation, all those questions are answered, right? It's at their fingertips. I imagine
yeah.
uh, that's how your C managers use the product.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe just like Kinfolk there, managers have access to Kin 24/7
Yeah,
at any time, and they can ask questions and get answers, and ask follow-up questions, get answers, and ultimately really kind of go to their people teams for the things that, maybe the tool does not have answers to. So yeah, I think that's pretty similar in terms of like the vision for the experience we want to create, and for the end managers. Jeet, maybe a
yeah.
question for you. So like, what are organizations, they have strategy in place. We've identified that, frontline managers are really kind of key to unlocking execution. What are organizations, maybe doing wrong, or missing? Like, what's the missing middle there? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the traditional approach so far has been that we are going to have this strategy, and we are going to involve people as much as we can with the best efforts, and then we're going to put it somewhere, and then we're going to hope that people look at it because people have the best of intentions, and then we're going to push messages out to remind people that this thing is there,
Yeah,
and then we're going to hope that they read it. And again, with the best of intentions, unfortunately, that doesn't work. HR teams spend so much time building
yeah,
up materials, content enablement, and nobody visits it
yeah,
afterwards. Because again, with even the best managers, they're so busy, like they're crushed between strategy and this like operational chaos that is taking place on a daily basis. Like managers are spending 1 day a week on admin in their jobs, 1 day a week, which is nuts. HR teams, by the way, are spending 2 days a week on admin, which is nuts. So I
that's
think
amazing.
that model of like we'll build it and they'll come type thing, or that you are in charge of your own development, I think is starting to slip away, and it comes back to the idea of like, hey, we have to go where the managers are, and we have to be available when they need to make the decisions, and we have to make it easy for them. And sometimes managers will not even know what questions to ask or where to look. And sometimes managers will not even ask those questions. To your point, it's like they might feel it's a stupid question and it never gets answers, and they end up being not a good manager, like
Yeah,
I had been previously. And you kind of just swallow it and you crack on. So I think that mindset, um, it needs to shift, and it is shifting. And it's really great to see some people first organizations really lead with that and say the models that we had previously of storing content and data in silos, and expecting people to turn up there. It's like, oh, we've sent our communications out, we've done our job. Well, actually,
yeah.
no,
That's just the
that
start,
person,
right? That's
that's
just
just the start. Yeah, exactly. What would you say, Paris, that you've seen that needs to change?
It's a few things that come to mind. One is kind of, I think of the word in context.
Mm,
And so, like, being able to provide that information, not just at the start, like, here's the documentation around onboarding, or like some state law or whatever it might be, tax. It's in context. So, can you embed that information in other places or where the manager is doing the work? If it's about onboarding, can you embed it in the onboarding tool or the HCM? If it's about something to do with sales, can it be, like, embedded in their CRM system? So I think, like being able to, you said this, like, meeting them where they are, and you maybe in context kind of the same. Like, that's one. I think the other thing is, I think about is like gamification, or, in a way, it's we're all humans. Like, there's a lot of, like, I think, human psychology and, like, that you can think about that helps people. Like, can you give them bite-sized chunks instead of, like, giant pages? Can you nudge them and remind them? Right.
yeah,
And timely follow-ups. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of change software, so it's not just that landing page where you go in and you have to go dig for information, and you're yeah. So that's what I think about. And I know you've thought about this problem a lot too, and the Kinfolk is certainly, like, thinking about human behavior, human psychology, and kind of meeting people where they are. So I'd love to get your take as well.
yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with gamification. I think it got a little bit of a bad rep a few years ago of like unicorns flying across the screen and like that kind of stuff, and or just like confetti everywhere. You were just getting drowned in confetti. But I think
That's true.
the hook model still stands, right? If you strip away all that stuff, it's like what is the reward that I will get for engaging in this thing that's going to be instant. Same reasons why we scroll on Instagram or now LinkedIn over and over again, because we're looking for that dopamine hit. So there has to be a payoff, and a lot of the models in HR tech previously has been super transactional. It's just been like, fill in this form and then something will happen and we'll come back to you in 48 hours. Or if you have a question, go to this portal. There's no payoff for the
Yeah.
individual,
Yeah.
and there's no value add for the individual. And so if we can give them that context, we've seen people engage with not just our tools, but previous companies that we worked at previously, um, give them something that's going to be useful for them at that moment, then they're much more likely to
That's right.
give you what you need as well. And then that way you get things like better data inputs, which means it's cleaner data, and then the HR team has much better visibility. So it really is I mean, to your point, gamification really is a strategic advantage, to be able to get better adoption, better data, better visibility, if we can incentivize people to use the product and engage in it in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So yeah, and gamification is a bad rep, but it's really about the incentivization, and, like, um, providing the right information, the right size at the right time, the
Mm,
right place,
yeah.
so basically in context. I agree with that as well. And how do you think about, like, aligning the, like, people investments, the tool investments, and leadership capability? For example, like, the way we think about it is we want to bring together, like, all the pieces of information you need to make decisions, whether it's like budgeting, business KPIs, down to individual employee performance, to, like, the benchmarks, so that people can are empowered to make decisions with, like, holistic data. But curious how you
Mm.
think about it as well.
Yeah, it is about bringing across the right data and packaging it in the right way. And I think you guys do this well, which is that, yes, it might be the same data, but it's a different flavor or a different angle on the data depending on who the persona is. And therefore, something that the CPO might be looking at versus the HRBP versus the manager, there's going to be like a shared layer of information to be able to have that shared context and strategy. But then
Yeah,
it's going to have different drill downs to be able to inform their daily actions, to inform what they're going to do next. And I think that's kind of like the red threads running through it that help to connect the dots and make the higher level data that's shared, give it more meaning. I mean, I kind of love to hear your thoughts of how you guys think about enabling the different personas that are engaging with Candor to be able to get what they need to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. What the recruiting team cares about is different than what the HR business partner cares about. What the manager will care about, or so what the finance team cares about are different. Yes, there's some joint places of overlap, but the recruiting team might really care about like what headcount is in review, or which one's been unlocked, or which one's been rejected, and that's something they care about. So we want to surface the data that's relevant for them on a daily basis versus the manager might care about that too, but the manager might also care about employee churn or budget and business KPIs and seeing if they're triangulating right to the right thing. The finance team might care about much more than the numbers, and so
Mm,
um, so that's a great question. Each persona, these are all things that might be tied together, but each persona has a
yeah,
different lens, different priorities, through which they're thinking about it. And so we try to provide different experiences for that persona, whether it's notifications, alerts, dashboards. We, even with some of our AI capabilities and our analytics capabilities, we've thought about them as like we've thought about them as humans. So like what kind of access should we give them to? So because
yeah,
just because we're building with AI in mind doesn't mean now suddenly people have access to all the information. So we've built our AI with like the same rules, access, permissions that you would a human user, and
yeah.
so that it's from a security perspective, it's surfacing the right information, and but also beyond that, you want it to be personalized to what people care about. So that's the other area of investment for us.
Exactly. And that's a really interesting way how you framed it, which is like almost what permissions you would give to a person. And that's how we think about it as well. It's like, hey, this is an HR coordinator. We may promote this AI
Mhm.
to an HR VP eventually, but right now it has these certain permissions. And anybody who's interacting with it, it also knows their permissions. So, if there's like comp data and the organization is not at a place where it's going to be full transparency and everybody has access to that, those permissions can be set. So only a manager speaking with kin would then be able to pull up that data. You're never going to get a situation where there's going to be, hey, like, what's the CEO's salary? Unless you're the CEO,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
unless you're someone from the HR team who has access to that, right? So that's really important as well, to find that balance and give people, not overwhelm them with information. And actually, the bridge between strategy and execution is to, well, make the bridge as short as possible and
yeah,
only give them information that they need in order to do their jobs,
yeah,
and the context that they need. And I'm not saying that to hide information from people, but more to reduce the noise and just make everything actionable for them. So I'd love to hear a little bit more on that piece. Like, how would you think about, if when you're speaking with CHROs and CPOs, how do you think about guiding them on what they can do to bridge that gap between strategy and execution?
yeah. I think that's a good question. I mean, in terms of bridging that gap between strategy and execution, um, other than like starting with equipping them with all the information and data themselves, the other thing
Mm,
we try to do is sometimes it's like peeling the onion, like, but open up more and more of that information to the managers. And with some customers, they might start with the executive team, and then the directors or VPs and directors, and then go frontline manager. And so what we tell them is it's not a 0 to 1 necessarily. Like every organization is different, right? You have
mm,
to be able to, as you are providing like this information and unlocking it, the like training and enablements required, like process change management. So we do provide people guidance around how to think about some of that stuff. So that's like the first thing that kind of comes to mind is there's no one right answer. Some people
yeah,
are more open and transparent by default, and some are not. Uh, so we work with them to kind of step into it, and that can take months or it can take a year or longer. And everyone might have slightly different philosophies there as well. So
exactly.
yeah,
It's so important to, when rolling something like this out, to build trust across the organization. And in order to do that, then you have to make sure that you roll it out with the right people and you have champions, and that you're providing them with the information to reach that aha moment sooner rather than later. To your point, it can take months sometimes, depending on the size of the organizations, as opposed to just like, hey, we're going to flip a switch. The product is now here, and all the data is here, and everyone's going to engage with it. And that doesn't really happen, right? It takes a bit more enablement. And I feel like vendors like us, there is a responsibility not just to provide the product, but actually to help guide people to make sure that they use it correctly and it's adopted across the business and they're getting value out of it.
That's yeah, absolutely. I think you said it really well. Maybe a quick follow-up question there, Jeet. So, can you share an example of if an organization is leveraging Kinfolk effectively? Like, what does that look like? What does real success look like? It'd be great to hear, the ideal state and how to get there. Do you mind sharing some?
Yeah, sure thing. So this is going to vary a little bit from organization to organization, to our previous conversations. But I'll give you a silly example. My wife works in a company where she's been for 3 years, and she still doesn't know how to book leave on Workday, and she asks her EA to do it. That's a total waste of time for everybody involved, including her EA. So simple things like that just disappear. People are enabled to be able to do things for themselves and by themselves. And you can start from simple things like that all the way up to, how do I run this performance review process? Or I want to be able to promote someone. What's the process for that? And then giving them the tools to be able to actually run that process through the likes of your Workdays or your HiveOps. And so to make something like that successful, or, it's like open enrollment season, bunch of confusion. How do we reduce that? And there's a bunch of different use cases. So the first thing that we do is a working session to figure out where are you getting most of your questions from? Do you even have the data to be able to point this AI at something, or are you just getting top-down pressure to point AI at things and hoping for the best? So to make it really successful, we look at what are the business priorities, and what are the questions that you're getting, and then what are the low-hanging fruits, and then be able to point it to those things. And then to choose a particular persona or a core of people that we can build this with. And typically that tends to be managers, because if you can unlock the managers, then you get kind of a force multiplier effect, and you also build trust much more quickly. There have been horror stories of so many HR tech rollouts that just haven't worked out, and continue to not work out. I think something like 80% fail compared to the targets that they'd set, or even a higher number. So we're quite careful about, particularly in this time when agentic AI is so new, and people are figuring it out as they go. It's really important to build that trust and to take it step by step, and roll it out in phases. To your point, like you were saying earlier, and releasing that information and that training as we go, and working really closely with them.
Yeah, I love that. So, like, you've kind of taken out of the product development ethos, like, hey, let's roll it out step by step. It's not going to be 0 to 100 on day one. Get some quick wins early. Find your champions. Find the manager or department or team. And set up questions and use cases you go target. I also imagine, setting the expectation with like software, like building software. It's not perfect, but it'll get better, and over time, as you use it more, as you give it feedback, as you tune it, and all those other things. So just setting that expectation, I imagine, is also a core part of it.
Yeah, totally. How do you guys ensure that something like CandorIQ is successfully implemented and rolled out? And what does that look like?
One, there's maybe with AI versus non AI side of it, but in I think broadly, same. We'll figure out, like, who are the right personas to focus on initially. What are the priorities? Like, we have a pretty wide platform, from compensation to total rewards to headcount planning. Like, what use case do we want to solve first? Is it on hiring? Is it about promotions? Is it about analytics? And really focus, customer to customer, like, make sure that use case is successful, and then go to the next one and go to the next one. So there's definitely like a crawl, walk, run. We roadmap. We have a joint action plan. We roadmap it out with customers. That's something we think about when there's limitations or gotchas, like we'll communicate that too. So part of it is just having that dialogue or communication. Like if there's a net new use case the customer wants to solve that we don't, and we have to figure it out on the roadmap, we'll have that conversation. And if it's with AI, we definitely set expectations around, here's a set of questions we feel confident that system can answer for you right now. Try it, give us feedback, let's tune it, then let's go to the next set of questions we can help kind of address as well.
Mhm.
So we're pretty like transparent that it's not the penicillin for all your problems, but if
Yeah.
we can get you if we can solve 70%, 80% of your problems, like that's pretty massive, right? If you said like HR business partners spend 2 days answering questions, if we can take a fraction of those, or like take a fraction of what the recruiting
Yeah.
team or the finance team is doing, that's administrative work, like that's already a massive win. So we don't try to
Yeah.
oversell it. We're pretty transparent about like what we can do well, can't do well, and what we want to work on with the customer. So I think that's part of it is key to just like expectation setting.
Right. And it's like, how can we basically bring them along that journey to say what is possible now versus possible later on? And are you willing to partner with us to get there? And I suppose on that journey, HR leaders are facing pressure, right, to do more with less. And it's happening more and more. So I'd be curious to hear, like, how do you think about making the case for them to invest in better planning and infrastructure? How does that
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. I mean, like, so when it comes to like compensation planning infrastructure, like we can help people build that like ROI cases, like hard or soft ROI, in the sense that, let's say a company's fundraising in hiring mode, and you hire like 3 people and pay them, give them the wrong, or hire the wrong skills, or pay the wrong amount, they're going to lose. And it's relatively easy to figure out what the impact of that's going to be from a dollar perspective, but also missing your goals and targets. And so,
Mm.
that's one piece of it. Or sometimes it's about it might be around like productivity. Some of our customers, when they do the compensation cycles or promotion cycles, merit cycles, it takes them 2 to 3 months to do it if they're doing it in spreadsheets, and they have multiple spreadsheets, and you have a meeting with every department leader and every manager, and multiple meetings with finance and your CEO, and if you can shrink that to 2 to 3 weeks, and it's all much
Yeah.
structured, much better experience, but you're also measurably saving significant amount of time and effort and human error. So it's we work through some of those kind of details with our customers as well, and it's relatively easy to justify, I think, especially because a lot of what we do is it's also helping the finance team
Mm.
and drive, collaborate with HR. And one, that's great for the HR team because, like, to your point, like less spreadsheets, more strategy, and being able to execute on that strategy. Like the HR team needs to be able to collaborate with the CFO, with their other leaders and executives, and it helps the CFO and the finance team that's maybe in an FP&A tool or like accounting tools, uh, communicate what their priorities and goals are and KPIs they want, like the HR and
Yeah.
business to achieve. So it's mutually beneficial, I guess, and so that's part of the conversation that we have with our customers.
Nice. And then following that, then let's talk about a real life case. You don't have to mention any names about the company, but I'd love to hear about one example of how someone has successfully connected headcount to performance and kind of the impact it had on the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about a customer that grew from I think like 300 people to 400 people over the course of a year. So in this case, it was growth. There's also, if you're not growing, there are case studies and stories, but they were like even they had a hiring plan for the year, and everyone starts hiring in Q1, and no one's thinking about cash flow, and
Yeah.
because the headcount's unlocked, and like, do you hire salespeople first or engineers first? Because do you build the product first that you're gonna sell, or like do you have a product? And so what are the business goals? What do we need to invest in first? Who should we hire? Like all of those things were related, and people talked about it, but it was hard to execute. So this company rolled out our headcount planning, where they had the company KPIs along with the scenario, and then the built-in rules and guardrails, like unlock headcount if this happens, and provide visibility to all the relevant people if you're hiring faster or slower than target. That itself was hugely beneficial for this organization to kind of scale up. Then they acquired a startup, a smaller company recently as well, and then they had to think about what does the future org look like, how integrated are we versus not, and it's hard to do necessarily do that in spreadsheets. Yes, like maybe you can count head count or spend, but you can't think about what's the right org design, what are shared services, what versus what's separate, because they want this new business to kind of keep running, and as a business unit, as a product line as well. So we were able to help them kind of model that out and think that through. So the few different use cases that we kind of helped unlock on a daily and weekly basis, but also at the macro level for them too.
Amazing. Good to hear. Well, I
Yeah.
guess I think we're about to run out of time here. So any final advice or takeaways, Haris, when it comes to converting headcount into execution?
Yeah, I mean, like I wrote a bunch of notes, but some of the takeaways were kind of bridging the gap between strategy and execution. I think the secret there is empowering the managers. If you create this hub and spoke kind of system where the HR teams is the linchpin, ultimately then your HRBPs, as you said, are spending 2 days or more like answering the same repeat questions versus doing strategic work. So really empowering the managers is key. The other takeaway I'll call out is kind of in context. Can you provide the right information in the right size at the right time and the right place? I know Kinfolk can help do a lot of that for organizations, but I think that's really key to unlocking the managers. So I think those are like the two biggest takeaways for me, but would love to get yours as well.
Yeah, I think you summed it up super well. I think the other piece of this puzzle is that you don't have to solve all of this in one go. Like it's so easy to be like, oh shit, this is a lot actually. How do we make this happen in the first place? And a lot of times we get, our data sucks, like our knowledge management system sucks, and therefore we can't use AI because we won't be able to leverage it properly. And actually, that's not necessarily true. It's not fully true. You can start to build the systems. You can point the AI towards particular things. You can start to build those models out and start to be a bit more thoughtful and phase it out and do it incrementally. And as you do that, you can learn. And invariably, the initial goals and the path that people think they want to take, it evolves. To your point, like you get gotchas along the way. So 100% what you said, and I would then say layer on the mindset of start small, and then build incrementally, and then bring people on the journey. And I think at that point, you're onto a winner.
Awesome. Yeah, like agile mindset, just kind of like software development, bring that mindset to rolling out HR tools. That's amazing. I know we're at time. Jeet's going to be there in San Francisco next week. The MPL team is going to be there in San Francisco next week. I'll be there as well. Well, I'm based out of San Francisco, but we have a happy hour happening at Wild Seed on the 5th. We'll share the details below. Open invite to all our attendees, our friends in the MPL community as well. Jeet, anything you want to give a shout out to for our in-person get together next week?
Super excited to meet everybody there and see some familiar faces. One of our customers is actually going to be there too. So it'll be great to be in the Bay Area. It's our first time actually there. So can't wait to be there. Looking forward to it.
Amazing. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody. Cheers, Haris.